This is a question that everybody thinks. What is the best GPU out now? But not just the best GPU, the best GPU for me or for you. Because obviously you can just say 4090, that's the one with the best technical chops, and that's very true. But you're going to spend $2,000 on that GPU almost, depending where you are in the world. Even in America, the cheapest ones should be 1600, but they're more expensive. So while that may be technically the best GPU, is it really the best GPU for you? I think the best GPU may actually be a little bit surprising. And now let's hear a word from our sponsor, VIP-CDKdeals.com, a Windows Pro CD key. Add to cart, you put in code CC20. This will also work on Windows 11. You want to go into your settings in Windows, change and adjust your CD key, click activate, and now let's go back to the video. Now, I love playing at 4K with, the ray tracing and all those crazy graphics. But after a while, you get kind of saturated with all that, and it doesn't matter like all the time having everything maxed out. You're just kind of chasing specs just for having the fastest things. Sometimes a slower GPU can actually give you pretty similar levels of, visual performance and things like that without being like too noticeable. So let's just rattle off a few GPUs here. I came to a conclusion on what I think the best GPU is now. So you probably want to watch until the end of the video and see if you agree with me. If you don't, it's okay. There are a lot of GPUs out there. Some people are going to have, different opinions. So first, let's rattle off some GPUs that I don't think are necessarily the best. The first one was that 4090. I think it's too expensive. It's technically the best. Don't get me wrong. If you want the best of the best and you don't mind slapping down 2Gs on a GPU, that's the one you should get. No doubt about it. Even though we are pretty late into the life of that GPU, if you're the type to want the latest, you probably have it already, and the 5090 is going to come out within the next few months, maybe the next year at most, so there's that to consider. So let's rattle that off. Then let's switch over to AMD. 7900 XTX. And notice we're starting at the top and we're going to make our way down to the cheaper GPUs, don't worry. 7900 XTX. Is it the best GPU? It does some things right, like the price is cheaper than what the 4080 came out at, and it's similar to the 4080 Super now. But you can say AMD doesn't have quite the same level of like driver finesse as NVIDIA. NVIDIA is going to have DLSS 3 and things like that. AMD does have FSR 3. They do have some software parts that are, pretty interesting, but they're not really on the same level as NVIDIA. And it's still an expensive GPU. So 7900 XTX and even the 7900 XT, let's cross those out. I don't think they're going to be the best of the best as a general statement, even though they perform really well. What about the one that it kind of competes against, maybe a 4080 Super? Now we're getting a little closer. At least it's cheaper than the 4090, right? Almost half the price. You're talking about MSRP of $999. You're getting 16 gigabytes of VRAM, pretty good memory bit bus. It's not like the 4070 Ti was, the 12 gigabyte version, with a very narrow, memory bus, which is terrible for 4K and ray tracing and things like that. So we're getting closer. I mean, the 4080 was a GPU nobody liked, the original one. Way too expensive at, $1,200. Nobody wanted to buy it, and that's far from the conversation. 4080 Super did get closer, but still, I think it's not really the best GPU, at least in the context that we're talking about. So if we go down to the one underneath it, is that better? 4070 Ti Super, same 16 gigabytes of VRAM, that's better. $799 MSRP, that's a little better as well. Now we're definitely getting closer. I think 16 gigabytes of VRAM probably is the sweet spot, and I was really hard on the 4070 Ti 12 gigabyte model when it came out, because at 12 gigabytes of VRAM, I think it was just way too little for what is an $800 GPU. At least the Super is 16 gigabytes of VRAM, so that's significantly better. At least you have something that's almost more like a 4080, and you save about $200, and you can play 1440p and even 4K now without like that much of an issue. Obviously, you're not going to max everything out or at least get really high, settings like a 4090 when you're talking about ray tracing and path tracing. But if you're talking about simply, rasterization, maybe using DLSS 3, 4070 Ti Super, definitely pretty decent. And now, what about the 4070 Super? Now we kind of hit a sweet spot, a little middle ground. Now, I almost want to say that this is going to be maybe my favorite GPU or what I consider the best now. There's one thing that's keeping me from fully really going after this as the best one. 12 gigabytes of VRAM. So we're going to have a little caveat here. I do think it probably is one of the better sweet spots, but if you really want to push your graphics settings, even at 1440p, beyond, just ultra, if you want to do ray tracing, it may not be the best for you. It's the best, I think, for most people who want a high-end GPU experience while paying $599 and maybe a little bit less, depending on the sales. That's why I think the 4070 Super is, after crunching all these numbers, kind of the best option for somebody right now that doesn't want to spend over $1,000 on a high-end GPU. Maybe they don't necessarily want one of the AMD counterparts that are around the same price or more expensive. It's going to give you DLSS 3, pretty decent ray tracing performance, and as long as you're not trying to push 4K with 12 gigabytes of VRAM, this GPU is going to be really good at 1440p. It's almost one of those things that it's not even just because it's the best because it's the best. The options around it are kind of like a little bit funny. I mean, the nearest AMD competitor at this point is going to be a 7800 XT, but that's more of a 4070 competitor, and it's not going to have the same chops as a 4070 Super when you're talking about ray tracing and things like that. And obviously the 4070 and 4060 Ti, that's when it gets either a little bit older, but also, especially with the 4060 Ti, then you're getting way too little for your money. So those GPUs definitely aren't the best. Now, the 4070 Super, I think, let's say if you just want to play basically any game out there and you have 1440p or even 4K, but you're going to really reduce these settings, I think you can definitely get away with it. And remember, you're only spending, or well, not only, but you're spending $600. I say only because GPUs went up in price a lot. At least it's not $1,000. So you're spending $600, which is still high, but not as high as it could be. And it still gets you a high-end gaming experience. I've switched out other GPUs like a 4090 and have played with a 4070 Super extensively, and it gives me a pretty good experience, especially with DLSS 3. I was playing Ratchet and Clank with ray tracing and things like that, and it does pretty well. Even Cyberpunk and Alan Wake, games that are very, very heavy, as long as you can tweak those settings, and that's going to be the key. For $600, you can still have a very good gaming experience. Now, a 4090 is better, but you're going to be paying 3 times the price. And even though you may think it's 3 times as good, you can still have just as much fun playing on a 4070 Super. So after much thinking, that's what I think the best GPU is now, especially if you get one around now and the new RTX 50 series comes out. You're not going to have as much of a big depreciation as like a 4080 or 4090 because it's already like middle of the road priced. I'm curious if you guys agree with me. What would you say is the best general GPU choice if you want to do some decent high-end gaming but not spend too much? Maybe that's the context that we should put it in. Let me know down below. Remember to subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next video.